was you fool. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
Well, good evening, patriots, freedom fighters throughout Saskatchewan, across the country, and around the world. There are a few. Where are we tonight? We are still at Canada First and Mark Friesen Saskatoon Grasswood over on Facebook because I'm still in Facebook jail. I got 13 more days to go before I can go live, before they let me go live on Facebook because I was a bad boy. The 60-day jail term from going live. Good evening, Sharon. And we're also back on YouTube tonight. So that's fun. We'll see how long that lasts. My shark-infested mouth, I'm sure, will get me another strike over there on YouTube. But hey, what are you going to do? And we're still on Twitch. We're on Twitter. I'm really shadow banned on Twitter right now, too. It's funny because a couple of days ago I had a video that it's over 12,000 views now, which is decent. I average somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 per video. And then I posted one at, I don't know, it was around 5:30, another 2-minute drill. And usually about after an hour of it sitting there, I'll have somewhere close to 1,000 views. And in this case, I had 24. So there's definitely some shadow banning going on over on Twitter. But we're also, of course, on Odyssey. We should be live over there on Odyssey. We should be live over on Rumble. And of course, we are live over on DLive. How are you folks doing over there on DLive? I see Spy Patriots hanging over there. Spy Patriot says, "I want to give you access to my YouTube channel on Fridays." You know what? I have YouTube. I'm there. If I get punted again, then sure I'll use yours. But and no tranny talk on your channel. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, we'll check it out. Like I said, I so far I'm good. So far I'm on YouTube right now, so it should be all right. Hey Gail, good to see you. Yeah, so interesting. As I was driving around today, every so often I get to I disconnect from my phone and I listen to 650. A lot of times it's sports talk. And Guy Lafleur died, so rest in peace, Mr. Lafleur. He was one of my heroes. Probably one of the main reasons I I've been a Hab fan ever since I could walk. Him and Ken Dryden were both sort of my heroes. So R.I.P. to Guy Lafleur. So I was listening to sports. I was listening to some of the tributes on 650, and then I heard because they'll play clips of Gormley, the Gormley Minute or whatever they call it, and I found it really interesting. I did a little 2-minute drill on this, but I found it really interesting how guys like Gormley, for 2 years, shit talked people like myself, like Tamara Lavoie, like Donna Todd, like R.B. Ham, and all of the others in Saskatchewan. They shit talked us to no end because we saw what was happening. We saw what was coming, and we got out there and we protested. We got out there and we tried to educate people. We got out there and voiced our opinions and voiced our positions because we didn't want to see the destruction of our economy. We didn't want to see the destruction of our livelihoods. We didn't want to see the destruction of jobs. We didn't want to see the destruction of childhoods. We didn't want to see the destruction and breakdown of society. And so we protested. And we protested because we firmly believe that we have rights, inalienable rights, that should be protected by our charter and by our Bill of Rights. And they weren't. And so all of those arguments that we used, that we stated, that we were vilified for, that we were called names for, Scott Moe referred to us as idiots. All of these things that they used to talk to us and to demean us and dismiss us and to vilify us are now the exact talking points that they're using themselves. It's absolutely phenomenal how John Gormley can try to say that Ryan Miley is Chicken Little because he's still promoting more lockdowns. He's still promoting mandates, just like John Gormley was promoting mandates and backing up the Saskatchewan government, who was enacting mandates and putting in and implementing restrictions and mandates, killing our economy, killing our livelihoods, killing our jobs, killing our small businesses and our children. Now they're using our arguments. It's phenomenal. The ability of these people to simply ignore themselves, ignore how they treated people like me, and how so many people are like circus seals that are clapping for fish and supporting these people who are saying the same things we've been saying for well over 2 years. But now they're saying it's okay, right? They're not right-wing conspiracy nut jobs. They're just mainstream. And it's now okay to support people who say freedom's important, who say the economy is important, who say small business is important, who say children's events and sports and activities are important. It's okay now because it's mainstream. And Ryan Miley is Chicken Little. Well, so are you, John Gormley. So are you, Scott Moe. So are you, Shahab. So are the rest of you MLAs who are chicken shit. Wouldn't say shit if your mouth was full of it for over 2 years. And now all of a sudden, it's okay. Because you decided it's okay. The media decided it's okay. Scott Moe decided it's okay. Well, you know what? Do you know why Scott Moe decided that it's okay? Because Scott Moe was sent a very stark message by the people of Saskatchewan. His supporters throughout the province, his party supporters throughout rural Saskatchewan had said enough. And so shortly before the convoy made it to Ottawa, Scott Moe was the first to announce they'll be lifting restrictions and mandates. The reason why he did that had less to do with the convoy and more to do with the fact that they had 10% of their donations at that point in time in respective years prior. 10% of their donations. So the people of Saskatchewan spoke up. They showed Scott Moe with their wallets that this is not cool. This is finished. This is over. And this is why I say we still have power. The people still have power to dictate to these people what's going to happen. We just have to stay strong. We have to stay united. We have to stay committed. But I find it extremely irritating. And again, kudos to them for, finally saying the words that we said. But when you have to put up with 2 years of horse shit from these people and them encouraging others to hate my people like myself and many others, when they do that and then they flip-flop, to me, it sounds so ridiculous. It's insane, actually. 2 years is a long time. 2 years is a very long time when you're protesting and trying to protect freedoms and trying to regain freedoms while getting $2,800 tickets for gathering outside in a protest and having police officers trample their own oath and have police officers trample our rights and freedoms by issuing us tickets. So disgusting. So thoroughly disgusted at every officer that completely ignored and dismissed their oath, that completely ignored and dismissed our rights, that they're hired to actually defend. Disgusting. Thoroughly disgusting. When nobody, including the government, as per our charter, where it says they have to demonstrably prove or justify the limitations to our charter, which, as far as I'm concerned, is ridiculous and it should be pulled out of the charter. But at any rate, it's there. Never once did any of these governments ever justify their actions with any evidence, especially outdoor gatherings. As a matter of fact, there was a case in BC where the government withdrew their case, withdrew the tickets, because they had no evidence to suggest that outdoor events were, in fact, a super spreader. Insane, of course. But the government in BC had no proof, so they withdrew all of them. Here we are in Saskatchewan. Our government is still going full force ahead with this insanity at great expense to the people of Saskatchewan, to the taxpayers of Saskatchewan, where they could just say, you know what? We made a mistake. We're actually going to be consistent with what we're saying now, and we're going to withdraw all of these tickets that we imposed on every single one of you people who's saying the same thing for 2 years that we're saying now. The government could do that. They could do it tomorrow and save the people of Saskatchewan a shitload of money in prosecuting these horseshit tickets. They could do it. They could do it tomorrow. So the hypocrisy of these people is astounding. And John Gormley, you're no different. I used to listen to Gormley quite a bit when I was younger. And for a long time, I'd find it hard to disagree with most of the positions that the man took. But in the last number of, I don't know how many years, he's gone completely sideways, completely off the rails. He makes himself look like a moron more times than not because he's so inconsistent. Because none of what he does is actually principled. None of it's based on values. It's all based on what his government or provincial party wants him to say and do. And the government, the Sass Party, who I used to be a member of, who I used to vote for, are also just as hilarious and ridiculous because they don't have any principles either or values. All they do is wait for the media to establish the narrative, and they fall in behind that narrative so they can keep some sort of semblance of support. That's it. That's the only reason these people do what they do, is to keep power. There's no principles. There's no values. And now those values were questioned. So what do? Of course, they flip-flop because that's what they do. It's insane. Anyways, so I want to share with you uh, hilarious just in terms of Gormley. So Kevin Boychuk, who ran for the PPC, Saskatoon West, who happens to be married to my cousin, so we're related, and we talk a fair bit. He sent me a recording of his call in to Gormley, uh, which I thought was pretty good. So let me just play that for you now. I always like to play Kevin's recorded call-ins to Gormley because he always has something good to say, and he's pretty passionate. So just for your listening pleasure, I'll play it for you. Hopefully, you guys can hear this. All right.
The show was going on, striking down the CDC, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, regulations that had extended mask wearing up until May the 3rd on all airlines, trains, taxis, any federally regulated transportation. The judge striking it down because the CDC had not consulted, did not offer sufficient reasons, and had exceeded its jurisdiction or its authority. So that was the reason there. It was amazing how quickly that house of cards stumbled. Virtually every airline says we're just not going to have the policy.
I love how Gormley is able to say and call it a house of cards. It's so insane because Gormley was promoting all of this horse shit when the provincial government was promoting it, and now that the United States of America has some judge has finally ordered that the masks come off on airlines. Now, of course, Gormley's talking like he's been there all along. He is the defender of freedom and common sense and reason. It's so insane. It's just so insane. Gormley, I hope you're listening to this. I hope somebody sends this to you because man, you're losing it, bro. You're. I don't know how anybody can support what you're doing because it's not based on anything other than narrative. That's it.
Said some airports, for example, have said we would like you to wear masks, but we will not mandate it. However, in Canada, the Canadian government quickly said they have no plans to stop the mask requirement on every airline, every train, every airport in Canada. And Omar Al-Ghabra, the transport minister, simply saying, it's the science. But he didn't explain what particular science he was relying on. So the question now remains, the Canadian landscape stays regulated mask, the U.S. landscape.
So now Gormley is talking about the science and talking about how the Liberal government is proclaiming science but doesn't have anything to back it up. Meanwhile, his Sask party, his beloved Sask party, were doing the same thing for 2 years. They didn't have the science. They've never justified anything. They've never proven anything. They've never come to the table with any actual science, just dictates to the people, with the media backing them up 100%. And now he's going to talk about how the government is stating science. It's so insane. It's so incredibly insane. Anyways, I'm going to keep letting this play. No, Grant, I can't come tomorrow. I'm heading out early in the morning. I'm leaving Saskatoon at 8 o'clock, going to Esterhazy. I got me and RB have an event there that starts at 1 o'clock. So anyways, I'll keep playing this.
Does not. Now, that's not exceptional. I mean, we got all sorts of differing regulations between the countries. Kevin, what do you think on the masking on airplanes?
Well, I'll take it a step further. It's masking and vaccinating. I think we need choice. We need freedom. We don't have it in Canada. We need our politicians from all political operation, but it is an adherence in Canada to, quote, science, and they don't really ever explain what that means, what science they're relying on, what the Public Health Agency of Canada is informed or invested with that European airlines might not be. I mean, this is where, and again, one thing we know about the pandemic, everything changes. And by the way, we still know if you get Omicron, and everybody's got it, everybody I know's had it, I think I've had it, I just didn't know I had it, or maybe I didn't, who knows? Maybe I live inside a cone, a cone all by myself. But no, I probably had it, I just didn't have any symptoms. But being vaccinated makes you a lot less sick, and I think that's the important part of it.
And they're still parroting that ridiculous statement. Plenty of stats, plenty of data coming out that most of the people in hospital are triple vaxxed. The more vax you get, the more jab you get, it seems the sicker you are, and the more sick people get because their immune system has been completely crushed. But so, again, I don't know how these people actually sleep. I don't know how they live with themselves. I don't know how they go to work every day knowing they're going to lie to everybody that listens to them. I don't know how they do it. The media does it, all of them. The government does it, all of them. This is their life. They go to work figuring out how best to lie to people. This is what they get paid for. And it's our money that pays them. The media included, because most of the media is paid by the federal government. They're employees of the federal government because they're propped up by the federal government. So they're essentially employees. So I don't know how these people sleep. I don't know how they look at themselves in the mirror, because when your whole goal is to lie to people, to convince them that what you're doing is right, but then you flip-flop so often that your credibility is completely destroyed by your actions and by what you've been saying. I don't know how anyone could support any of these people anymore. I don't know how it's possible. I don't know. Anyways, it is now 8:00. I see my good friend Salim is backstage. So now we're going to quickly switch over to our discussion in regards to domestic and foreign policy under globalism and what that looks like. And we're going to identify some things and talk about some things that our globalist governments are into and what's happening. So without further ado, my good friend Salim Mansur. Hello, Salim.
Hello, good evening, Mark. Good evening to all our friends.
Yeah, good to see you. It's been a couple of weeks since our last one. We took Easter off, which was a good break, and here we are.
Here we are, and we can talk about climate change from southern Ontario. This is the third week of April, and we've had snow. We had snow during the Easter.
Us too.
And so much for global warming, and that the planet is going to blow up.
I think Canadians can take a big bow because we're all paying more in carbon taxes, and obviously it's affecting that temperature dial directly. It must be. So, everyone can take a bow, paying more carbon taxes. Who knows? Maybe we'll be skidooing in July if we pay any more.
Yeah, and with gas prices and heating prices rising, global warming will flip over and become global freezing. I think that's where we are headed.
Well, I think we all know why they changed it from global warming to climate change, because, the climate has always changed, and that's probably an easier way to cover themselves for what they're trying to do.
That's right. And so in effect, I was paying attention to you as I was in backstage the last 2 minutes before you got me in. You're talking about our domestic politics and about what is happening and how any of these people can get elected right from the prime minister down. Well, one quick answer from my point of view would be uh, the people have been lied to and lied to and lied to for the last 30 years. I can go back, even further, but 30 years is the period we're talking about. This is the 30th anniversary coming up of the Rio summit. And so we've been lied and lied and lied to. And in effect, our brain have turned into, remember the disease that was spreading in Europe in the 1990s and about the cow.
Mad cow, yeah.
Mad cow disease that affects the brain. We have all been affected by that. Our brains have become just sponge of garbage. We cannot do any critical thinking. We cannot engage in analyzing things around us, and we have become just a herd. And that's why these people keep getting elected.
Well, and the thing is, Salim, is I keep trying to reinforce with people as more and more people understand what's happening and why these things are happening, as crazy as the world continues to get, more and more people are starting to ask why. And when they ask why and they find out the why to all of these questions, remember that all of your politicians for the last 30 years or more knew about this agenda. They knew about this sustainable development, Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, referred it always as conspiracy theory around people like myself who were trying to raise awareness, but they all knew, and they did nothing to inform the people, to inform the masses as to the consequence to this plan, to this agenda. And now when people are realizing, because everything is so crazy and attached to this agenda, they're starting to realize, hey, wait a minute. And when they do, I want them to understand and recognize the fact that politicians for the last 30 years have lied to you by omission, right? And so I always try to stress that.
Yeah. I mean, in effect, what you're coming back to, we have been lied to. Our brains have turned into sponge, using the analogy of the mad cow disease. We don't know anymore in terms of, I'm talking about the large number of people, the capacity to question, because we're looking through the one window that is the mainstream media and our institutions that we send our children to, that we have gone to, that we have come out of. In my own particular case, I spent my life in the university, in the ivory tower. So in that sense, we are all culpable because, we provided information, we discussed issues that came out of one window. Alternative voices were censored, were marginalized, were ostracized. I know my friends in the natural science faculty, some of my friends with whom I still remain closely in touch after my retirement, those who spoke out against global warming from hard science point of view, physicists, mathematicians, and others, they were marginalized, and they couldn't speak. So there's a huge amount of culpability around. But the bottom line is, as you say, and I agree with you completely, there is our responsibility, that is the people of Canada, the public. Because ultimately it is they, that is we, the people, are expressing where we stand when we go into the ballot box and vote for people like Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland or the whole lot of Conservative Party candidates. we are responsible then, because we have to live with the consequences of the choices we make. I would always tell my student, and this is the week after Easter, um, I would tell my student that the first act of getting ahead in whatever subject one is dealing with, to be able to distinguish right from wrong, truth from falsehood, etc., is to begin with the most important philosophical statement ever made by any human being, or to the Christians, a human being who was, divine. That is Jesus, when he said, take the beam out of your eyes. Take the beam out of your eyes before you go looking for the mote in your neighbor's eyes. I said, we are all blind. We have to take the beam out of our eyes. We have to question ourselves. It begins with I. It doesn't begin with you. It doesn't begin with anybody else. And I would like to remind everybody around me that that's where it begins with. And we have to begin taking responsibility, because we are right now so far down the slippery slope that the possibility of being able to come back to normalcy is now almost out of the question. And that's why you talked about the headline, or the theme about domestic and foreign policy, the world that is around us, that we can no longer separate the two. They're intimately twined, they're like the DNA spiral. We cannot separate the two. It is, just to take one quick example out of the top of my head, I think you and I have spoken about this a couple of weeks ago or whatever, that when politicians like the people running for Conservative Party leadership right now, some of them go out and say, oh, they have nothing to do with the World Economic Forum. In other words, they're not responsible for any aspect of the globalist agenda. They are dealing with lies. They're lying, flat out lie, because to say that they have nothing to do with World Economic Forum, or they're not engaged with World Economic Forum, or they haven't gone to the Davos meeting of the World Economic Forum, etc. Well, that is sort of providing a cover up to the other side of the World Economic Forum, the flip side. The World Economic Forum is the driver of the UN agenda. So if you're not part of the World Economic Forum, please tell us where do you stand on all of the UN agenda since 1992 Earth Summit.
Exactly.
That you have signed up on.
I did a video, one of my 2-minute drill videos here just a couple of days ago on that exact thing. And it was one of the most popular videos I've done. It's got over 12,000 views already. And it was asking the question of Pierre Poilievre. Okay, so you denounced the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, which, fair enough, I'll take it for what it's worth. Okay, so if that's true, the World Economic Forum, the UN, officially partnered in June of 2019 to achieve the goals of sustainable development, which your party, the Conservative Party of Canada, is fully responsible for, because they signed it in 92, made it law in 2008, signed it again in 2015. Does that mean Pierre Poilievre is denouncing his party? Is that what that means when he denounced the World Economic Forum? Because he never mentions sustainable development. He never mentions the SDGs, Agenda 2030, ever, because he can't, he won't, because he knows his party's responsible for it. And this is the game that the Conservatives continue to play. It's this bait and switch. Look at me denounce the World Economic Forum, but never talk about what you're truly responsible for and what you to this day still support.
Absolutely. But sadly, you and I both know that nobody is going to question him in any forum on that issue. In the leadership debate, there will be no such question, and they themselves are not going to engage in asking or answering any question of the sort that fundamentally you and I have, putting on the floor. Where do you stand, X, Y, and Z, right, on all of these issues, which has now put Canada into a situation where we have the noose around our neck? Canada is not a free country. Canada is no longer a sovereign country. This is not something new. This is now has happened over a period of time where we have arrived. We that is our institutions, are simply the stenographers for the globalist agenda. We simply rubber stamp anything and everything on the globalist agenda. So we've gone from climate change through all of the various UN Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development, Compact for Global Migration, etc., to COVID-19, which we now know was the biggest hoax perpetrated on mankind. I have seen the recent figures that have come out this last week, in which the death toll of the millennial generation, that is, people born at the turn of the century, so they would be anywhere between 20 and 35, that's the age group. Figure showing the mortality of this age group in the United States of America, we're not talking about Canada or anywhere else, exceeds 61,000 deaths, which in 1 year is greater than all of the American soldiers who died in the Vietnam War over a period of a decade. The Vietnam War was 58,000, according to the estimate and what is on the Black Wall in Washington. 58,000 Americans lost their life in that war. We're not counting the numbers of the Vietnamese and the Cambodians and the Laotians who died, and that goes into millions. In 1 year, as a result of COVID, more young Americans have died than in the entire Vietnam War. And nobody's taking any responsibility for it.
Right.
There's no answer for it. That's the extent. And so we went from there to now we have shifted without anybody held accountable for the war in Ukraine. And that page has been turned. So we go from one set of lies without accountability. We now know, except there is no jurisdiction in which this can be presented.
Right.
We now know that the COVID-19 virus was a gain of function research, that is a man-made virus that came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It had very little to do with an accident. It was a deliberate thing. And we now know that this was funded by the Americans, Dr. Fauci and his contacts, that is the EcoHealth Alliance, with Peter Daszak and other virologists who were working on the gain of function research that had been made, illegal by the Congress not to fund it and to stop it. So because they could not do the actual gain of research work in American laboratories, they then subcontracted that through EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak Group to Wuhan Institute, where they did the gain of research work from where it was released. And now further proof we are now getting that there were 21, minimum 21, if not more than 21, biolabs in Ukraine that was being funded by the Americans through the same group of people in which Peter Daszak and EcoHealth was involved, through the companies like Metabiota and EcoHealth Alliance, under the supervision or authority of the Defense Department, that was being done in Ukraine, which now the Russian army under Putin has basically seized over. And they were trying to say that it has nothing to do with them, but eventually they had to make the admission, yes, that they had funded it, and now it is up to the Russians to produce the evidence, which they're going to do in their own jurisdiction once the war is over. So we have been lied to, constantly lied to, and what cannot be done domestically is being done by exporting it outside, and the victims are not only the people outside in Europe or in China or in Africa or in India, it comes back right over here, as in the case of America. 61,000 millennials dead in 1 year. That is greater than the number of dead in the Vietnam War.
Right. And so what do they attribute those deaths to?
What was that?
What do they attribute those deaths to?
They're attributing it to the experimental drugs that were sent out, that complicated the whole matter, and that is being discussed. And yet the mandate has not been completely removed. People are still debating about masks. They're still debating about vaccination and so on and so forth. The back and forth is still going on. And not only that, we are stepping forward into the very agenda of the WEF, that is the digitalized economy, digitalized identity and control. The question of free speech that is gone. There is no longer, what the West took pride in, particularly America, based upon the First Amendment. We in Canada, we never had a robust free press or free speech. We always had controlled speech. But in America, that was the First Amendment, and that is gone. It's not there anymore. The question is whether they can get it back. That's another story of Putin, of Elon Musk and Twitter that we have on the table. But we have to turn outside of America, outside of the West, to get an alternative news and understanding. For instance, on the Ukraine war, the entire reporting by the Western media, right from the BBC, which has been and has become even more so now, the propaganda arm of the oligarchs. People are calling the British Bullshit Corporation. It's no longer the British Broadcasting Corporation. From BBC and all the mainstream media in Britain, to Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, that is the Anglosphere, the reporting is completely based upon lies and false flag operation, and there is no counter story that is being told to balance it off. You have to go outside to get the news, whether you go to the Chinese media, the Global Times, you go to RT, the Russian Times, or to the bloggers. There is a whole list of bloggers who are, because of their access through language to Chinese, Russian, East European networks, that we can follow what is actually happening in Ukraine and where we are. If you go by the American news and the BBC, Russia has been defeated 5 times over. The war is over. They're out of ammunition. Their army is crushed. Everything is done. Whereas the reality is completely the opposite. It is only now a question of time. The Russian military operation is not similar to the American military operations in the Third World. It is an operation in which, particularly in Ukraine, the Russians are engaged in entrapping the Ukrainian army in eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region, and the 2 republics, Lugansk and Donetsk, around it, and then in the southern portion around the Black Sea shore, going into Odessa, to trap them. And they're basically, according to what I'm reading and following, they've basically done that. It is only a matter of now wrapping up that operation. And then they will move towards the west, towards Kiev and Lvov and the Galicia. And then there is going to be the surrender. I mean, what is very clear from my research and from my reading and following the news almost on a daily basis, I've been following that there is no further negotiation where Putin and the Russians are concerned. It has got to be an unconditional surrender, and that unconditional surrender will happen once the Russians move towards Kiev and towards Lvov. But in effect, Ukraine now is going to be a divided country physically, no longer theoretically. The river Dnieper is going to be the boundary between east and west. And east of the river Dnieper, there are the two republics that has been established or have proclaimed their independence, the self-determination, Luhansk and Donetsk. And then Crimea is already part of Russia through the referendum that happened in 2014, but they will extend it all the way into Odessa, and the whole Black Sea coast will then be Russian territory. And the rest will be left to Ukraine, or what remains of Ukraine, but it will be a totally neutral. What Russia has said, it will be neutralized, and if the American and NATO countries want to keep on sending arms and equipment into Western Ukraine, Russia is going to take them out with their weapons.
Right. And again, it's important to reiterate that all of this could have been avoided if only NATO, and I'm going to throw in the World Economic Forum because they obviously have influence, if they would have just lived up to the agreement that they came to in 92 at the fall of the Soviet Union, that they wouldn't move 1 inch closer to Russia from Germany, and they broke that agreement 14 times. Ukraine represents the 15th time that they attempted to break this agreement, and so it all could have been avoided, all the death and destruction, and so it's interesting when I talk about this on Twitter. I get I get some blowback that I'm being insensitive. Well, I'm not. I actually support the Ukrainian people. I don't support the Ukrainian government, but it's unfortunate that the Ukrainian people are being used by their puppet regime, to the World Economic Forum and to the UN and to NATO. It's just unfortunate that the Ukrainians are stuck in the middle of all of this. And again, something that could have very easily been avoided, but they knew exactly what they were doing when they decided to go into the Ukraine and push for this Ukraine being part of NATO. They knew exactly what the consequences of that would be.
Right, exactly. And it again, that thing comes back to what we began with, that is, we the people, where it is our responsibility. And what has happened is that we have gone on a very happy-to-go-lucky ride for the last 30 years without any sense of responsibility. We have never asked the question. That is, we didn't ask, our politicians did not ask, because our politicians, as Ronald Reagan would say, would shame the oldest profession. So, they are worse than the oldest profession. So they haven't asked. There's been no debate. Take the case of COVID-19, almost 2.5 years we have gone through it. There was no serious debate in the parliament on the whole issue of what in about 5 or 7 minutes I laid it out, that we now know these facts. But these facts were all coming out. Who provided the gain of function research, where was this experiment done, how it was released, so on and so forth. But we might not have our parliament totally, that means our people we totally failed because we had the chance to make a difference in the 2021 election. We failed, you know.
Right.
So we are paying the price. But the rest of the world has been watching. I mean, we have become so arrogant that, let's say it very clearly, the Americans have become, and we as part of that, have become so arrogant that we believe that we are the God's chosen people, that we cannot do anything wrong, that our intentions, our motives are so pure as angel, that whatever we do it on the side of righteousness, and the rest of the world is evil. You know, whether it is Russian, whether it's Chinese, whether it is Arabs, whether African, whoever. So for where I'm heading to, again on foreign policy side, is since the end of the Cold War, the Americans and the Western powers, particularly the Anglosphere, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, have behaved as if their interests and their ideology, what is called liberal internationalism, is the basis of the idea and ideology and framework for the rest of the world. And that they can then impose upon the rest of the world. That is the liberal international rule-based order. That they can impose it upon the rest of the world without, worrying about what other people think about what they're imposing, and whatever the cost, it doesn't matter. So for 30 years, the Western powers, that is America, and America is the uniparty state. There is no longer any difference between the Republicans and the Democrats on this issue. They're all basically one. And now that was exposed by Donald Trump, the deep state. So it is not who you elect to the Congress. It is who are paying the members of the Congress, that is oligarchs and the big financiers, the foreign interests. So they're not held accountable by the people who are sending them to the Congress, just as we are not accountable, the people in Canada, to who we are electing. They might run for the Liberal or the NDP or the Green or the Conservative, but in the Parliament, they're all part of the globalist framework. And that's what exactly in America. So they have pushed this liberal internationalist rule-based order. What has been the result? We can see that. Color revolutions, beginning right from the 1990s, around the Great Middle East, in Europe, in the Balkans, in Serbia, into Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, Kazakhstan, most recently, only last week, 10 days ago, in Pakistan, where an elected government was removed by a no confidence vote, because of the manipulation by the Americans and the British. So these things happen, and most of them, if not all of them, were basically third world countries. They could not resist. They could not push back. And the thing was played out. The most grotesque was the wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Libya, where the Americans and the NATO forces bombed the hell out of these people.
Right.
Third world people. They couldn't fight back. They were massacred.
You didn't see too many Syrian flags flying around North America at that point, did you?
That's right. And so the regime changes. It is not about good guys and bad guys. They're all, let us agree, bad guys. I'm not here going to make apologies for Saddam Hussein, for instance,
Right.
But the operations that were done on the basis of rule-based order, flaunting international law. and nobody questioned them. I'll give you an example. And now reflecting back on this, I have to do my own mea culpa because I was supporting the government of the United States at that time and the Western powers on the issue of regime change in Iraq or in the 2003 war that came about. We now know, and that's my mea culpa, and I ask for forgiveness from my good Lord and from all the victims of that war, that I was wrong. Forgive me. Whatever words that I said or whatever I wrote, I was wrong, because all those information are now out. And so I give you the example. What happened? And on this respect, how greatly the Canadian government has changed, because in 2003, the Prime Minister of Canada was Jean Chrétien, a Liberal Prime Minister. And ironically, Jean Chrétien was right, and everybody who went to war was wrong. Because what Jean Chrétien said and what he did, and this is to refresh the memory and make the distinction between rule-based order and international law. In 2001, after 9/11, the bombing, the terrorist attack on New York and Washington, the Americans took the matter to the United Nations and got the UN Security Council resolution to go to war in Afghanistan to take out Osama bin Laden and the Taliban regime, and it was called Operation Enduring Freedom. And so the war was launched within a matter of a month and a half after 9/11, and Canada joined that effort. Canada voted for the resolution in the United Nations, or rather supported it, because Canada was not a member of the Security Council at the time, but Canada's that is, Jean Chrétien supported it, and Canada sent its own armed forces into being part of the coalition in Operation Enduring Freedom. But then came 2003, and on the issue of Iraq and weapons of mass destruction and so on. And the UN Security Council resolution to authorize the war if Saddam Hussein failed to comply fully with the resolution. So UN Security Council resolution 1441 was tabled and voted upon, and it got 15-0 vote. So it was a unanimous vote in the Security Council that Saddam Hussein and Iraq would have to fulfill all the obligation. And George Bush and the British Prime Minister at that time, I forget now the name of the British Prime Minister. Oh, Tony Blair. George Bush and Tony Blair took Resolution 1441 and said that they have the authority to go to war. Well, the French President Chirac, said, no, a second resolution will have to be presented to authorize war. The 1441 was not an authorization for the war. It was an authorization to look into the weapons of mass destruction and to get the report that Saddam had fulfilled all the obligation. And if he hasn't fulfilled it, you need a second resolution. And otherwise, that is, France was going to use its veto. And once France said that it's going to use its veto, if you don't have a second resolution, George Bush and Tony Blair knew at that time that they could not get the UN Security Council approval to go to war. And so what they did was they said, no, we're not going to bring on a second resolution. This is the resolution, and we will go to war. And that's what they did. And when Jean Chrétien was asked about it, Are you going to, is Canada going to be a member of the coalition of willing? Look at the term, coalition of willing.
Mm.
It was not a UN Security Council operation
Right.
that had given the authorization. Jacques Chrétien said no. And Jean Chrétien did not participate. That is, Canada did not participate in the 2003 operation against Saddam Hussein. And now looking back at it, it is so important that we in Canada understand these things. You know, we did not go into a war. We maintained our national sovereignty. We acted on the basis of international law, which is the Security Council resolution. That is part of international law. It is not a rule-based order that people in Washington, the neocons, decide what is right and what is wrong, as they did with Serbia. They bombed the hell out of Serbia, Kosovo, using NATO because they could not get the UN Security Council vote. Because if they had gone to the UN Security Council, they would have been vetoed.
Right.
In the case of Serbia, in the case of Iraq, they did not have it. They destroyed Iraq. They went into Serbia. They destroyed Serbia by NATO, including the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. You know, so what we have seen for the last 30 years is no respect for international law. It is basically the unipolar hegemony. We are the Lord, we are the master, we will tell what it is, and the rest will have to follow.
Right.
And then guess what? What happens? I mean, in the Ukraine issue, that's what happened. Russia, since 1991, actually 1989, I have gone through all the records and it's all laid out because these are now available in the archives, have been open. I posted some of them on my Facebook. Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin, and then Putin, they all made it very clear that NATO expansion to the east is something that is unacceptable, and there is going to be a red line. There is a red line, and that red line is states on the borders of Russia, that is Ukraine. Warsaw Pact countries, well, Russia did not, Russia objected to it, but they went along. And Russia did not say that they're red lines. So Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and some of the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Bulgaria in the south, they were all brought into the NATO. But Russia made it very clear that Ukraine is a red line. And I think the same red line applies to Finland. And now Finland has put up its name to go into NATO, and I think Finland is going to wake up, in a very sorry state if they follow through on the NATO issue. But coming back to Washington and Paris and London and Germany, they knew all of this because their prime ministers and their chancellors and their presidents had all basically signed agreements and given verbal assurances to the Russian leadership that NATO will not expand east. And without any discussion, here we are, Canada is a member of nations. There's not a single member in the parliament that has stood up to ask our prime minister, to ask our foreign minister, what is happening?
Salim, we have such an enormous deficit of leadership in this country. That would never happen in the situation that we're in these days. There's nobody federally in any party in parliament that would have the fortitude to stand up and actually question any of this because there are no leaders. They're all followers, every last one of them.
You're 100% right. I stood up to go and speak about this issue, so I ran.
Right.
We are not all heard. We are Canadians. We have principles. We have morality. We are committed to the fundamental values of our country, our constitution, respect for international law. We are not woke. We have not become members of the Homo Global Association of the World led by Klaus Schwab.
Right.
We're not here pushing the arguments of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is what is happening in America with Walt Disney and everything else.
Right.
But the Canadian people are failing themselves.
Yes.
I mean, it is not simply pointing fingers at Justin Trudeau. We have to point fingers at ourselves. We are failing our children and our grandchildren, our parents and our grandparents. When they were told to join the armed forces of Canada, the Allied forces, and they were told that we have to go and defend freedom in Europe twice in the last century. They left their jobs, they left their homes, they enlisted, and they went to distant shores because their government, their leader said they have to fight
Right.
tyranny. They have to fight race-based ideology of totalitarianism, and they put their lives on the line, and they fought and defeated them. We are their children, and what are we seeing? Our government are now supporting the very people with race-based ideology,
Right.
funding them, supporting them, cheering for them. What are we, the living, and how are we, the living, honoring the dead, our parents and grandparents who fought for our freedom?
And this
So
is why.
we are 100% culpable and
Yes.
complicit.
Yes. And this is why I always say, people ask, they thank me for all that I do and the energy that I put forward in trying to turn things around in my own little way. But my answer is, it's duty in honor of all of those before us, that when duty called, they answered and they went and they defended the values that we cherish. And so I have a duty to do this in honor of all of those. Where's the rest of our country? Where's the rest of the people that should be defending the values they claim to cherish? And this is why I always talk the way I do.
100%, because freedom doesn't come without rights and obligation.
No. Absolutely.
So this is where we have come, both domestically and foreign policy. They're totally, intimately bound. They cannot be separated. And so what is happening, we might not be able to carry this discussion until next week. If we come back, God give us life. But what is happening is there is now a head-on collision that was to come place. We did not know how it would come about, but one would anticipate this is Newton's law of actions and reaction. Nobody can escape that. For every action, there is a reaction. The question is where it is going to happen, when it is going to happen, and with what force it is going to happen. That might not be predictable in human affairs as it is predictable in nature. So that is happening right now. The Great Reset, which was given acceleration through COVID-19. By the way, the very term Great Reset came into use in 2020 with World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab releasing his book, The Great Reset.
Right.
Right? And now it has become part of our language, So somebody should ask Pierre Polier, where does he stand on the Great Reset, and everybody else who's running for the leadership of the Conservative Party, where do they stand on the Great Reset? Because whatever they say, the fact of the matter is that the issues of the Great Reset, we 38 plus million Canadians are having to pay for it right now. And we will have to pay for it for generations to come. Our children will have to pay for it, and our grandchildren will have to pay for it, in the manner in which our economy has been dismantled and shredded. Our money has been inflated beyond any meaning, So all of those have to be answered, and someone has to take responsibility of what they're going to do about it, and what is the argument that they're going to present, the policies that they're going to present. So that is on the Great Reset one that is in operation, and is like anything in terms of velocity, the momentum is speeding up through the COVID-19 and now into the Ukraine war. But the pushback on the other side is what I would call the Great Rupture. The Great Rupture is also now in play, and the Great Rupture is the pushback from Russia. Russia and China has come together. Their alliances have become more and more solid. Along with Russia and China coming together, there are other countries that are joining them. India, Brazil, South Africa, many of the Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia has signaled. Iran is already part of it through alliance with Russia. Other North African countries like Algeria, these are all oil-producing countries. They're all joining up with Russia and China. Against what? Against the Great Reset. Because they kept quiet. Because after all, America is the strongest military power and economic power, and the American dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So they kept quiet. They went along with it. And what they saw during the COVID was the bankruptcy of America and the Anglosphere. Take the case of India. India, with a population 3 times plus the population of America, they dealt with COVID not by listening to the WHO, but by applying their own common sense logic to it. They use ivermectin, they use hydroxychloroquine, they use vaccination too, but they use the therapeutic medication to deal with it. And India dealt with it in a much better way than the Americans, than the Europeans, than the Canadians. So they saw, and India was not alone. Others were watching what happened. And now with the Ukraine war, they again saw the manner in which the Western powers have behaved, and they have pushed this matter, that the war in Ukraine was totally uncalled for, and it should never have happened. And the price is being paid by the Ukrainian people, along with the Russian people, military, but by the Ukrainian people. And it is now very clear to the people in India, to the people in Brazil, to the people in North Africa, and in much of Asia, that the Americans, the neocons, are going to fight in Ukraine till the last Ukrainian. They will not allow a diplomatic settlement.
And I really think that Ukraine is a fairly defining moment in all of this. And it's interesting because I'll still say this, that Russia and China again paid a lot of lip service to the UN, paid a lot of lip service to the globalists and their agenda, but I really still believe that they were playing the game that would benefit their nations the best and the most, while paying lip service to this agenda and the people involved in it, because they would like nothing better than to see the destruction and the weakening of the West. I can't help but think that this, of course, Russia is going to play lip service and China is going to play lip service and enter into agreements like the Paris Accord where they are exempt until 2030, to live up to. But they're there, right? And they're playing their little game. But again, at the end of the day, this agenda is so destructive to nation states, especially in the West, that Russia and China and other countries would like nothing more than to see that happen.
No, that is now so much visible as a result of Ukraine, right?
Right.
But before Ukraine, on the issue of climate change and net zero policy of global emission, carbon emission, that they were putting into play from the Kyoto Accord through the Paris Accord to last summer or last spring, the COP 26 in Scotland. They're pushing through, and they have their timeline. They have set up, by 2050 to have net zero emission, and so on and so forth. And yes, the Russian, the Chinese, the Indians, the Brazilians, the South Africa, all of them were there, and they were all signed on to it. But there was wink going on. The wink was that the whole burden of net zero emission was basically upon the advanced Western countries. That is, who had bought the entire package of globalism. And when it came to the others, Russia, China, India, Nigeria, and so on and so forth, there was no argument for them that they have to, get into net zero. There was nothing. I mean, every month in China, they're putting up one new coal factory for their energy need.
So this whole discussion again leads back into the whole, domestic being 100% attached to foreign policy, because again, we're in this deficit of leadership especially in Canada, and federally, and by all parties. There's nobody to stand up and say, no, we need to make the best decision on behalf of the people of our country, which they would look at and probably vilify that statement, because they're so entrenched in this globalism and that I hope for the day that enough people wake up that they yearn for some leadership and yearn for somebody to stand up and defend the values that we claim to cherish.
Well, the great irony today, in terms of we are living in one planet, we are nation states, so we have now the question of sovereignty is about nation states, about people, but right. The home in terms of planetary term is one planet. We are living on one planet, and people are watching. And ironically, what is happening right now with both COVID and with the war in Ukraine, a great many people in the West, I believe, as I go through the blogs and others, and I look at the comments, they're looking to leadership not from their own people. That is, Americans are not looking to American leadership in Washington, or in London, looking to the British Parliament, whether it's the Labour Party or whether it is the Conservative in government. They're ironically looking to leadership with Putin, with the Chinese, with the Indians. Why? And the answer is also very simple. Nobody's looking towards angel. Putin is not an angel, or the Chinese leaders are not angels compared to Biden or Boris Johnson or Justin Trudeau. No, what they're looking to is somebody has to break the back of globalists. And the back of the globalists is not going to be broken by the Prime Minister of Canada or the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of England,
Right.
And on Sunday there's going to be an election in France, and we don't know whether Le Pen is going to win. The possibility is, I think, minimal, because the deep state will not want Le Pen to win, and they are going to work towards getting Macron re-elected. So Macron is not going to be the one who's going to break the back of the globalists. So you're looking towards China, Russia, India, and others, and the argument that the mainstream media and the herd mentality in Canada, in Britain, in United States is that if you do not support or do not agree with your government on the question of Ukraine, just as if you do not agree with your government on the question of COVID. What happened? On the question of COVID, the trucker convoy all became Nazis because there was one guy walking with a Nazi flag.
Right. Exactly.
And now the question is, if you don't agree with your government, your leader on the question of Ukraine, then you are basically a Putin supporter. You are a Putin troll. That's all just so much hogwash. We who are looking at it objectively, and by the way, the word objective doesn't exist in the woke language, because everything is subjective. A man can be a woman, so there is no objectivity anymore. If a man can be a woman, objectivity has gone. There is no objectivity. But those of us who look at things objectively, we're looking at it that no, this war was a war, as was COVID-19, a war created by the globalists, the neocon,
Yes.
to push the globalist agenda. The war is a means to an end, just as COVID-19 was a means to an end. They didn't care what damage was done. They didn't care, whether it was 1 million people died in America, 61,000 young men and women in 1 year died in America, more than 10 years of Vietnam War. They didn't care. For them,
in fact, those things would be a benefit to them.
Yeah, exactly. The end is that globalist agenda, and those of us in the West who are standing up or who are talking, who are asking questions, we are doing this because we do not accept the globalist agenda.
Right.
We do not accept unipolar world. What ironically, while I disagree with the Chinese on the China way, I don't want to live under the China way where, we are watching the videos coming out, what's happening in Shanghai, what's happening in Canton, as they have shut down the cities. By the way, they're doing that in North America too. They have done that. But anyhow, I don't want to live in China under those conditions. Not even the Chinese want to live in China under those conditions. But the point is that the Chinese government is pushing back, as are the Russian, as are the Indian, for a multipolar world. And in a multipolar world, we are back again to negotiating, to defending the sovereignty of our nation states.
100%.
If our prime minister and our political leaders were defending Canada, I would have no brief and no grief against them. I would be 100% behind them, and I would respect, as Donald Trump said, you defend your national interest, we defend our national interest, and we negotiate.
Exactly. But we have a prime minister who, after the first week of being elected the first time in 2015, referred to us as a post-national state. So we have a leader that started his term in office by saying he's already seceded our sovereignty to the globalists. And this is what we've been under ever since.
Right. But on that matter, now again, we are always rethinking, looking at it, examining it. My view is, whether Justin Trudeau in 2015 interview with that New York Times reporter, Guy Lawson, if I remember his name correctly, talked about what he said. I mean, that was his first international interview after winning the election in 2015, that Canada has no core identity and Canada is a postmodern state. Now, I would like to propose or suggest that whether Justin Trudeau is a moron, a black-faced moron, or whether Justin Trudeau is a liar, but on this particular instance, he told the truth.
Right.
He told the truth, in effect, that Canada has become a country that has no core value, no core identity, and it has become, in the sense of the elite, the people may have core value, but the people are electing an elite that has no core value.
100%. 100%.
And so the whole irony was that he revealed what Canadians should have paid attention to, but they didn't pay attention to.
And he did it again at the beginning of COVID, or in September of 2020, where he said they're using COVID to achieve the goals of sustainable development and to reimagine the economy. He told us, right? That's the second time a major statement was made. But again, it flew over the head of so many Canadians that, here we are. But Salim, I want to take this conversation and I want to, again, next week, expand a little bit more on it. We covered a lot of great stuff tonight. Fantastic. But we're at about an hour and a half, so that's about perfect for sharing now. So
thank you, Mark. Look forward to talking to you again next week.
Yeah, me too. And I just so you know, I put out a post. And for anybody who's watching that lives in Northern Ontario, I did put out a post hinting that we and you may be doing a tour on our way to Ottawa for Canada Day through Northern Ontario, and I listed the towns and cities that we'll be going through. So I've put the word out there. I'm doing it again now on the live stream. So if anyone's in, look at my post on Facebook or Twitter. If anyone's in any of those centers, by all means, contact me, email me, use Messenger, whatever the easiest, and we'll see if we can put some stops together. Me and Salim want to do that tour and carry on our education and information to the masses as best we can. So, yeah.
Keep me posted. It will be just phenomenal, fantastic to be on the road with you, Mark, and really to go out and meet. Long overdue, and to meet our compatriots along the shores of Lake Superior. It would be just wonderful.
Yes.
I hope I'm keeping well, and I hope you're keeping well, and that we can do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. I hope we can put it together. So have a look at the towns that we've listed. Again, it's on my Facebook and as well as Twitter. And if you're in those areas and can help, put together a venue and to promote it, get in touch with me. That would be fantastic. Anyway, Salim, thanks for joining us again tonight, and we'll see you again next week for sure.
Thank you very much. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Salim. Oh, and one last thing. Ramadan. Is the fasting over now?
No, another 10 days to go, and approximately. Okay. Yeah. So, I've been fasting. I'm okay. Just sometimes feel a little low in energy because lack of coffee and lack of sugar. But otherwise, everything is just fine.
All right, my friend.
Okay, my friend. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All the best. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye now.
Yeah.
All right. Another great round with Salim. So I'm going to cut this one short now because I'm hitting the road tomorrow morning bright and early to make it to Esterhazy. And yes, I see that there's going to be some weather. Naturally, it's, the end of April and we're still dealing with snowstorms. But whatever, it is what it is. We'll get through it. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to this one. So that's going to be a wrap for tonight. Thanks, Grant. Appreciate it. Yeah. Remember, globalism, bad. Nationalism, good. All right. Make sure you guys share this out too, would you? All right. Ciao for now. Love you guys.
One day, one day, one day, I hope you see the truth. This puppet show stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.